welcome to Timekeeping. This show will attempt to chronicle year-by-year changes to the Disneyland Paris resort, from the excitement of a new ride opening to the minutiae of a store changing names. Join us as we celebrate 30 years of the resort. Fort Comstock acts as the entrance to Frontierland, the largest version ever built, which is really saying something considering Frontierland was the main focus of the first Disneyland back in 1955. It was fitting, though, as Europe has a fascination with the Wild West. Cowboys, Indians, and outlaws were the furthest thing from life in that country. Outside of the fort, guests will find teepees decorated with Shoshone Indian paintings, demonstrating the sometimes peaceful relationship between these people and the white man. Thunder Mesa is the fictional town represented throughout the land, marking the first time in Disney Parks history that an entire land shared a cohesive backstory. Its name derives from the unbuilt Thunder Mesa complex that would have housed the Western River Expedition at the Magic Kingdom. The attraction ultimately wasn't built, but the secondary thrill ride component of the project, from a young Imagineer named Tony Baxter, would be built at both Disneyland and Walt Disney World simultaneously. The ride was the wildest in the wilderness, Big Thunder Mountain. According to the folklore of the Shoshone tribes which inhabited Thunder Mesa was the roost of the legendary Thunderbird, who guarded the gold within Big Thunder Mountain from anyone who dared take it, creating earthquakes with flaps from its powerful wings. A depiction of the mythical creature can be seen facing the Phantom Manor. In 1840, while colonists arrived in the area of Big Thunder Mountain searching the land for precious minerals and other riches, their search would soon prove successful. They would violently force out the local Shoshone people in their greed and xenophobia to do this. A rich vein of gold was discovered in the red rocks of Big Thunder, and as soon as word got out, more and more settlers streamed into the area, transforming the serene wilderness into a lively and steadily growing gold rush town. The founder, an evil man named Henry Ravenswood, named the town Thunder Mesa. For his own family, the increasingly wealthy Ravenswood began construction on a grand mansion on a hill overlooking the sprawling town. Apart from the 4-story manor house painted in white with a red gable roof, the estate encompassed vast gardens decorated with marble statues, as well as the family cemetery on the banks of the river. Its owner's dearest pride and joy, however, was his beautiful daughter Melanie. She grew up protected, free to pass her time in the expansive manor gardens under Henry's watchful eye. However, as she grew older, things began to take a turn. Henry was incredibly overprotective of his daughter, distrustful of any man trying to court her, and he had hoped to keep her in town. Additionally, townspeople were undermining his authority and taking gold nuggets from the mine without him knowing. In 1860, shortly before Melanie was to wed a train engineer named Jake Evans, an earthquake struck Thunder Mesa, killing Henry and his wife and dropping half of the town into what is now known as Phantom Canyon. Melanie's groom, however, would be killed shortly before the wedding by a mysterious phantom, said to be Henry's restless spirit. Melanie began endlessly searching for him, never to be seen again, with Ravenswood Manor becoming known by the locals as Phantom Manor. With the loss of the Ravenswoods and Big Thunder's gold, Thunder Mesa settled into a quieter river town. The land was fully propped with authentic relics of the American West thanks to Imagineer Pat Burt, who set out into the furthest corners of 16 states to find these antiques, some as large as steam tractors. Seeing as the props were authentic, crews had a hard time installing some of them with their modern tools, but luckily, Pat had purchased antique ones that they could borrow to get the job done. The background music features riveting scores of American westerns, from Bonanza to The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly to The Big Country. Mixed in are the sounds of bullets, horses, and children. To complete the feel of the Old West, horseshoe prints and other textual elements were even imprinted in the ground. The town consists of several restaurants, shops, and other points of interest. Along the main thoroughfare, you'll find 3 restaurants: the Lucky Nugget Saloon, the Silver Spur Steakhouse, and the Last Chance Cafe. The Lucky Nugget Saloon is the main entertainment hall in Thunder Mesa. Diamond Lil, the proprietor, was imagined to be a Mae West-style character who uses her feminine charms and keen business sense to establish herself. One day, Diamond Lil was taking a tour of Big Thunder after charming one of the miners, and she struck at a rock and found an enormous gold nugget. From this moment on, her fortune grew, and you could find this lucky strike that started it all on display inside the restaurant. The Lucky Nugget name also comes from the saloon in the Disney film The Adventures of Bullwhip Griffin. The rest of the establishment is loosely based on the design of the Golden Horseshoe at Disneyland, although this one is painted with a patina to offer a feeling of warmth, like beer or bourbon, especially in the wintertime. The curtains of the saloon feature one of the most exquisite pieces of art at any Disney theme park on Earth, an illustration by John Horney representing the entirety of Frontierland. It is essentially a gloriously painted map of Thunder Mesa, featuring all of the town's landmarks. The Last Chance Cafe features bullet holes present in the facade. It's themed after a stereotypical bar and includes decorations such as pistols and holsters, horse saddles, and rifles. It features a rather large terrace with around 50 wooden chairs. The Outlaws and Desperados met each other at the Last Chance Cafe, and while the saloon and the Silver Spur restaurant are a homage to gold and silver, the Last Chance Cafe offers a reference to the third seminal metal of the West through its counter made of hammered copper. The Silver Spur Steakhouse is themed to a high-class steakhouse in Thunder Mesa and is the closest restaurant to Phantom Manor. Ornate silver chandeliers and sconces feature the trademark spurs and Wild West creatures as well. Also, there are stunning statues and displays under glass. From time to time, a live piano player even brings the space to life. When the park opened its gates in 1992, the restaurant contained some real masterpieces by Edward Borain, Charles Russell, and Albert Bernstadt that had been lent by an American collector. Unfortunately, they were replaced by copies in 1994 as grease was penetrating through the glass showcases, a process which over time would have damaged the priceless originals. The Thunder Mesa Mercantile Building contains Bonanza Outfitters, Eureka Mining Supplies and a Psy Office, Tobias Norton & Sons Frontier Traders. A mine shaft is located in Eureka Mining Supplies. Story goes that the owners of the shop used the shaft to access Big Thunder Mountain and smuggle its gold from the Ravenswoods. The Rustler Roundup Shootin' Gallery across the way is another iteration of the Disney classic, which has made its way into every Frontierland, including the one Western land ever built. The river that flows around Big Thunder Mountain is the Rivers of the Far West, called the Rivers of America in several other Disney theme parks. Calls to mind the Rio Grande, the Colorado, and the Sacramento rivers of the American West. Smuggler's Cove was created as a river pirate hangout, but it also used to practically serve the purpose of a ride, load, and unload area for the River Rogue keelboats. These boats were adapted from the original Mike Fink keelboat designs borrowed from Disneyland and Walt Disney World. Guests could board the River Rogue keelboats named the Raccoon and the Coyote, inspired by the 1955 film Davy Crockett and the River Pirates. The boats would depart from Smuggler's Cove, a hideout for river pirates. The design for Smuggler's Cove is based on natural caverns, caves, and river inlets that water has carved out over time along the sandstone rock formations that line the banks of the Colorado River, particularly where it flows through Arizona. The smugglers along the rivers of the Far West quite often successfully stole large sums of wealth when they attacked unsuspecting boat travelers. This was because many of these travelers were carrying considerable amounts of gold and silver that they had personally mined from Big Thunder. Two more considerably opulent boats traversed the river as well, the Mark Twain and the Molly Brown. The Mark Twain, of course, was a replica of the classic steamboat that had been a part of Disneyland since 1955. The Molly Brown is exclusive to Disneyland Paris. Quote, "We needed another boat with the same capacity as the Mark Twain," explained Jeff Burke in Disneyland Paris from sketch to reality. "We wanted to establish more contrast and liven up the river." Nautical designer Ray Wallace, who had created the Mark Twain for Disneyland in the 1950s, suggested a paddle steamer similar to those that used to navigate the Sacramento River in California. The name Molly Brown came from one of the most famous survivors of the Titanic. Molly was married to Johnny Brown, a Colorado man who made his fortune mining. She had also toured Europe, and she knew Mark Twain. The idea tied in well with the atmosphere Imagineers were trying to create. An Indian Canoes ride opened at Euro Disneyland on April 12, 1992. It also closed in 1994. They were moored at an old Indian landing bay decorated with hides and birch bark. Assisted by two Indian guides, 20 guests per canoe paddled the rivers of the Far West, including areas other vessels could not go, such as under a rocky arch that spans the river's two islands, known as Rainbow Arch, and down through a flooded cavern beneath Big Thunder Mountain Railroad. Old Joe and his cabin is not an original concept for Disneyland Paris. The structure and the audio animatronic figure were adapted from a similar staging along the banks of Walt Disney World's Rivers of America because it enhanced the overall story of Frontierland. He can also be seen in Pirates of the Caribbean at Disneyland. When Imagineers borrowed the idea of Beacon Joe, they wanted to give his figure its own personality, so they made him Old Joe, the fisherman who greeted passing boats with his barking dog. Imagineers enlarged the dock he sits on and expanded the size of his shack, as well as extending the shack's roof so it would protect Old Joe from the inclement weather. The group of male, female, and baby moose were staged on the banks of the rivers of the Far West as an example of the wildlife to be found along the rivers in Washington, Wyoming, and Colorado, all gold mining territories. The natural arch bridge that's connected to Big Thunder Mountain's south side and then plunges into the river is styled after the Double O Arch, which is found in Utah's Arches National Park. The original geyser basin next to Phantom Manor is based on Yellowstone's Mammoth Hot Springs. A rock or mudslide effect was once planned for the space next to this, but that was canceled and the land was left blank, even still to this day. In August of 1991, it took nearly 4 days to fill the man-made lake. The water was brought in via a huge pipe located in the wall just below the Rustlers Roundup shooting gallery. When the water started gushing out of the pipe, the entire Disneyland Paris Frontierland team on site started to cheer. While primarily based on the Florida version, Paris's version of Big Thunder Mountain is unique in that it was situated on an island in the middle of the river, where Tom Sawyer's Island would normally sit. It's also the only version of the ride ever to be an opening day attraction. Guests board the trains at a station on the mainland. Immediately upon leaving the station, the trains dive into a tunnel that transports them under the rivers of the Far West to the island. The train makes a right-hand turn, makes a quick steep rise before starting up the first lift hill. As the trains climb out of the darkness of the underwater tunnel, stalactites and stalagmites can be seen growing next to the track. The sounds of bats swooping up above can be heard, and at the top, a waterfall parting around the track suggests that the tunnel is flooding. The trains pop out of the tunnel, leave a lift hill, and drop around a left-hand turn, passing through a small cave, then make a swooping right turn. If the trains are being dispatched timely, when a train goes through this curve, it'll appear to make a near miss with a train in the 540-degree helix. After this turn, the trains pass under the second lift hill and its drop, making a slight hop before making a left-hand turn onto a trestle. The train runs along the rivers, across the water from Phantom Manor, then makes a slight right-hand turn and suddenly falls through a washed-out section of the trestle. The trestle drop also contains an on-ride photo section. After dropping down to the water level, with water jets on the sides of the track simulating a splashdown, the train goes around a left-hand turn onto an unstable portion of trestle, entering a mining camp and begin to climb the second lift hill. As the train starts up the hill, 2 tied-down donkeys can be seen to the right side of the track, braying at passing trains, with an empty watering pail in front of them. A goat can be seen chewing on a work shirt hanging on a clothesline to the left. All this as the trains pass a parked steamroller and a mine elevator, and then travel under a water tower. At the top of the lift hill, the trains drop around a left turn and cross back under the lift hill. The pre-recorded sound of screeching wheel flanges can be heard as trains go around the curve. And as the train comes out of the drop and goes over another rise, it passes a sign warning of a broken trestle that is mounted to the water tower post. Cresting the hill, the trains cross over the broken trestle and spiral down a 540-degree counterclockwise helix. Entering the helix, the trains pass through a short cave and go over a quick airtime hill as they shoot down a canyon. And as the train drops through the tunnel and passes over a trim break, a loud gust of wind is heard. The trains then make a right-hand turn onto another trestle that seems to creak under the weight of the train as they enter a tunnel with signs warning of blasting over the portal and climb the third lift hill. The third lift hill was originally a simulated earthquake. The train crests a small hill, then drops to the left onto a straightaway alongside the river, speeding up as it enters the return tunnel. The train encounters a swarm of bats in the tunnel as it makes another sharp counterclockwise turnaround and goes down a steep drop to cross under the water. The trains continue to accelerate through the dark until it pops out of the exit portal on the main land. The trains then coast past the station through the loading dock and then turns to re-enter the station. Tony Baxter was enthralled with the thrilling start and finish that the trip under the river provided, often citing that this was his favorite version of the Disney classic that he created. Even after it opened, more detail was added to the attraction. In December of 1992, a Frenchwoman by the name of Madame de Grisey offered her collection of 200 cactus plants to Disneyland Paris. During the milder seasons, these can be seen on display in front of Big Thunder. While planning Euro Disneyland, Baxter decided that certain staple Disney attractions would have to be modified for the new park. The Haunted Mansion was among these, and it was given a darker tone than the original version because Europeans, quote, don't understand scary funny. The greatest challenge was the name, the Haunted Mansion, so they had to find something that would read in many different languages. Thus, Phantom Manor was decided upon. Jeff Burke was assigned the role of executive producer of the construction of this park's version of Frontierland, and with help from Imagineer Bob Baranick and show writer Craig Fleming, it was decided that the story related to Phantom Manor would have to be congruent with that of all of Thunder Mesa. A major influence for the story of the ride was Gaston Leroux's novel, The Phantom of the Opera. The secondary plot focusing on the abandoned bride Miss Havisham from Charles Dickens' Great Expectations, as well as the European Gothic legends, which were altered for Western settings. The architectural style would be Victorian Second Empire. Inspiration for Paris's Frontierland's architecture was provided by historic buildings in Virginia City, Nevada, and specifically the Fourth Ward School for Phantom Manor. Imagineer Mark Davis disliked the derelict aspect of the building, stating, quote, Walt would never approve of it. Ron Esposito saw to it that the right side of the house was more aged than the other portions, simply because bad weather would emanate from the east. Brighter colors were used on the protected portions. We know the story of the town and Henry Ravenswood, but what was to be of his daughter? Well, on Melanie's wedding day, the mysterious phantom, unknown to anyone, appeared in the house. And while Melanie was preparing in her room, the phantom lured Jake up to the attic where he hung him by the neck from the rafters. Guests get to see this moment in the stretching room before the ride begins. In the ballroom, the bride sat alone. Hours went by with no sign of the groom. Guests slowly filed away, leaving Melanie alone in the house with the staff of maids and butlers. Quote, someday, she told herself, he will come. And so, having never taken off her wedding dress or dropped her flower bouquet, in preparation for her loved one's return, she wandered the house aimlessly, singing melancholy songs of lost love. But the phantom was still in the house, laughing at her human devotion to her intended husband. One after one, he invited his dead, demonic friends from the afterlife to fill the house in an eternal party. A dark curse fell upon the home, and the shape of the house was slowly transformed by evil forces. No one ever set foot in the house again. Inside and outside, the house was decaying with age. Dusty cobwebs covered every inch, the disheartened staff not caring, for it was rumored that Melanie had lost her mind. She wandered the house for years and years, singing softly to her groom, while all around her demons and ghosts reveled and danced. Everywhere she went, she was reminded of the wedding. The phantom's eternal laughter still carried through the walls of the home. And outside, the once beautiful grounds were falling apart and crumbling. The gilded staircase and structure were dotted with mold and trees, and every plant on the grounds had died. As if sensing the evil inherent in the house, nothing living ever trod there. Even so, Melanie kept her hopes, waiting for her love's return, and never figured why he didn't show up at the wedding. The earthquake that killed her parents all those years ago cut a huge gouge in the west half of the property and in the crumbling ghost town of the old Thunder Mesa. The deserted buildings were rumored to be called Phantom Canyon, the dark, supernatural version of the town, and anyone who entered the ghastly old town at night never came back. Today, no one knows if Melanie Ravenswood is still alive in that old house on the hill, and if she is, well, then she'd be well over 100 years old. Her beautiful voice still carries over the town at night, though, through the walls of the house and night air. Some nights when the moon is full and the sky is clear of clouds, one can still hear the lonely mourning of the bride, the maniacal laughter of the phantom, and the faint tinkle of glass and the laughter of the party guests. Whether she is alive or not, what is well known is that poor Melanie never really left the crumbling mansion. She waits for her groom until Judgment Day. Many people believe the phantom to be Melanie's father, Henry Ravenswood, seeking vengeance from beyond the grave. Others believe that it is the pure spirit of evil and that a curse has been placed upon the young girl. Phantom Manor's Omnimover portion is similar to Disneyland's Haunted Mansion system. The track layout of both are almost identical, but not completely. The main difference is that Phantom Manor's track is slightly longer, primarily to accommodate the Phantom Canyon scenes that substitute for the graveyard in the other rides. Many scenes from the classic haunted mansions are replicated, but altered to incorporate the new Western theme and plot. Upon entering the grounds, guests can see a bat guard box and a plaque on the wall which reads Phantom Manor. Non omnis moriar, which is Latin for I shall not die completely. A derelict gazebo stands on the lawn that has a tea set laid out. Originally, these used to move to mimic two people pouring and drinking tea, and at night the light in the gazebo flickers. The gazebo also contains a music box playing within. This is also the only mansion in any of the parks that has guests enter the ride through the front door. Shadows and lights can be seen from within the house at nighttime, and Melanie can be seen from a window in the facade carrying a candle from one window to the next. The foyer contains a dusty chandelier and two mirrors, and is lined with dark wood paneling. The voice of the Phantom sounds from the ceiling and around the room, politely welcoming guests, telling them the legend of this place and inviting them to explore the mansion further. Melanie's face fades in and out of the smallest mirror during the narration. The Phantom was originally voiced by the legendary Vincent Price, but legal agreements that required the narration to be primarily in French meant that a French writer, Gérard Chevalier, was brought in to record a French version of Price's narration. Price's narration was only used for the first few months of the attraction's operation. Chevalier used to be used as a dub for Price in many of his movies. However, a small piece of Price's recording was kept in use for the original version, The Phantom's Evil Laughter. From 1992 to 2018, the four portraits were of a young Melanie in the stretching room. Melanie is having a picnic with her fiancé in one portrait, holds a parasol in the second, picks roses in the third, and steps through a stream in the fourth. As the room stretched, the paintings grew taller, revealing Melanie in some haunting situations, including riding a boat about to go down a vertical waterfall, having a picnic with her boyfriend as ants, a rattlesnake, scorpions, a spider, beetles, and more raid their food, wading through a small stream as an aquatic monster reaches for her foot, and as well picking roses from above a tombstone while a skeletal zombie emerges from the ground, gripping a small rake in one hand. The scene revealed in the attic was also slightly different until 2018. Instead of just showing the Phantom evilly laughing, he was hanging Jake Evans, Melanie's sole groom in the original version of the attraction. Like the Disneyland version of the ride, the octagonal portrait gallery is actually a pair of cleverly disguised Otis elevators. The floor is lowered and the ceiling is raised slowly at the same time to provide the stretching illusion. This serves the double purpose of both dramatic effect while lowering guests from the manor to where the actual ride begins at a real ground level, in a separate warehouse-style show building behind the berm. This is all hidden by a forest of trees to render it invisible from riders of Big Thunder Mountain and the rest of the park. The ceiling above is actually a scrim which conceals the Phantom until he is backlit from above. Stepping out of the stretching room, guests walk down the portrait corridor, which takes them from the manor visible from within the park into the show building that houses the actual ride. This corridor does not pass under the park's railroad, which instead travels behind the show building and has the Grand Canyon diorama in this area to obscure the show building. As the guests walk down the corridor, they see four portraits. The original paintings were all taken from California and have since been added to Walt Disney World. A knight and his horse on a cliff becoming ghostly beings, a young woman in a Greek temple sprouting snakes from her hair and becoming Medusa, a ship sailing across the sea to become a tattered and ghostly version of itself, and a woman reclining on a sofa that turns into a cat. At the end of the hallway stands a large portrait of Melanie Ravenswood, wearing her bridal gown. Guests then turn a corner, passing by the Follow You busts and entering the loading area, a large hall with the grand staircase leading to the upper floor. One can see a ghostly, foggy landscape with flashes and bolts of lightning through the huge window above the stairs. An old furniture lines the walls. Sitting on a shelf is a bust of a stern-looking woman, who stares at guests and seems to follow them as they pass by. An unbroken train of black omnimover vehicles known as carriages move through the center of the room, alongside a moving platform to enable easy loading. Guests board the carriages, each accommodating 2 or 3 persons, and then move upwards to the show building's main floor. Prior to 2019, guests would pass a young Melanie bowing while holding a candelabra and singing the entire time. In the endless hallway, Melanie could be seen appearing and disappearing in the distance while the candelabra she is holding remains in view. On the left side of the corridor is a conservatory containing a piano, adorned with wreaths of the deceased suitors. At first glance, it seems to be playing a minor chord version of the wedding march by itself, but one can notice a ghost pianist's shadow falling on the carpet, this effect achieved by the use of mechanical keys. A large red-eyed raven sits on a music stand next to the piano and squawks madly. The carriages then travel through a corridor lined with doors, and as guests pass each door, they hear pounding, knocking, or shouting behind it, and the knockers seem to move by themselves, as if their inhabitants are struggling to get out. When the last door is reached, guests can see two skeletal hands clutching at the top, trying to force their way through, with the skeleton yelling, "Let me out of here," using the same audio as the skeleton attempting to escape his coffin in the conservatory in the other haunted mansions. The carriage passes a small hall containing a demonic grandfather clock with a large 13 on its face instead of the usual 12. Its hands are spinning backwards as it chimes. The walls are lined with wallpaper covered in demon eyes, of which start to glow green. This was the first time this effect was ever attempted. Of course, Walt Disney World would add something similar years later. The carriage then enters a round seance room where a crystal ball sits on a floating central table, and at one time, ghostly shapes appeared in the windows surrounding the room. In it is Madame Leota's disembodied head. Behind her is a raven perched on a chair. As guests watch her, she summons ghosts and dark creatures to a mysterious ball in both English and French. Guests leave the seance room and move along a balcony, looking down into the ballroom where a ghostly wedding party is taking place. Melanie stands on a staircase singing. Ghostly guests enter the room, bringing in wedding presents, then sitting around a dining table where a moldy wedding cake is waiting for them. Drunken ghosts swing precariously from the chandelier above the table. Elegantly dressed pairs of ghostly dancers twirl around the ballroom as a spirit organist sits at a massive organ, playing a haunting waltz. Leaving the ballroom, the vehicles enter the bride's boudoir, which replaces the attic scene of the other attractions. A dying fire is crackling in the fireplace, and then guests see Melanie, who has given up looking for her long-lost groom. Melanie was an old lady. She sits weeping into a mirror while the phantom skeletal face stares back at her. All the while, a music box plays as well as an old gramophone. The mirror was fogged up to look like an actual skull, in reference to the Alan Gilbert painting, All is Vanity. The clock displayed in the room has a blade pendulum, in reference to Edgar Allan Poe's The Pit and the Pendulum, which was also a basis for a movie featuring Vincent Price. The carriage leaves the bride's boudoir through an open double door and glide across a terrace, then out into a stormy graveyard, past the first audio-animatronic phantom with a shovel, whose skeletal face is finally revealed, standing before an open grave with an undead dog growling beside him. The phantom laughs as the doom buggies pass by. This is Phantom Manor's version of a friendly but frightened groundskeeper and his dog from the other mansions. In total, the ride features 92 animatronic characters, a nod to the year the park opened. The carriage then travels underground to the catacombs, presumably Boot Hill, and sees a series of coffins being opened by their skeletal residents, as well as the skeleton hands attempting to pry open a coffin from the inside. The singing busts then come into view, singing Grim Grinning Ghosts, as the dead skeletons join them in a dance. Of course, Grim Grinning Ghosts is present throughout the attraction, but so is a Phantom Manor score original to this ride. Through a hole, the carriages then enter the Phantom Canyon, which is a twisted, supernatural version of Thunder Mesa. Great rifts in the earth surround the vehicles, suggesting that an earthquake has happened, which reenacts Thunder Mesa's turning point from a prosperous community to a ghost town. An eerie-looking Ticketmaster, an animatronic using the same mold as Ezra from The Mansion, stands before a ramshackle train station, offering the riders train tickets to the underworld. Guests then pass a ruined town hall where the mayor, who speaks clips of dialogue from Paul Frees in the original Haunted Mansion, and happens to be the same mold as the Dreamfinder from the original Journey into Imagination at Epcot, holds the key to the city and invites guests to be the Manor's 1,000th ghosts, but of course, beware of hitchhiking ones. As he tips his hat, his head comes off with it. A shootout follows between a bank robber fleeing on a mule and a cowardly sheriff, with Big Thunder Mountain in the background behind. Guests see a pharmacy where a green-faced pharmacist drinks a potion of some sort, followed by a saloon whose front wall has caved in. Inside, there's a dancing showgirl, a bartender, and a man playing a honky-tonk piano. Every once in a while, a hand with a candelabra appears out of the piano. Meanwhile, 4 invisible gambler figures play poker nearby. Much of Phantom Canyon was derived from a planned scene of the wild mining town called Dry Gulch in the Western River Expedition of the Magic Kingdom. Another cackling figure of the Phantom and his ravens stand by a tree with a noose and several empty coffins for awaiting guests, his eyes glowing red at passing riders. As they see the silhouette of the manor ahead, they enter the mausoleum, where guests would encounter Melanie's floating skeleton pointing the way out. The vehicles enter a subterranean chamber lined with large, gilt-framed mirrors, then through a wine cellar where cast members await to help them disembark their carriages, and they walk towards the exit. A small Melanie would beckon guests to hurry back. Finally, guests exit into Boot Hill, a cemetery filled with humorous gravestones, as well as ride-oriented gravestones for the Ravenswoods and several others. If one should turn around to look back at the house, they can see the Phantom looking out of the window over the exit and down at them, all before he closes the curtains. In the cemetery, one can hear Melanie's beating heart in her tomb, both a reference to the original Haunted Mansion bride, whose red beating heart could still be heard through her chest, and as well Edgar Allan Poe's The Telltale Heart. Traveling through the town and back to the outskirts, Fuente Del Oro restaurant is a counter-service restaurant located across from the entrance of Big Thunder Mountain. The general layout of the restaurant is based on that of traditional Spanish or Mexican four-sided haciendas with a courtyard at its center. With Fuente del Oro, half of one wall was removed so guests on the adjacent promenade had a better view of the restaurant. Although the structure is not based on any actual historic building, it does incorporate many details typical to hacienda architecture, such as the adobe walls and the wooden beams sticking through the facade. To underscore the effects of the harsh environment of the American Southwest, from blazing sun to freezing snow, portions of the protective plaster of the Fuente del Oro building were omitted, as if fallen away, exposing the adobe brick construction underneath. The facade's rich color palette of terracotta and orange was intentionally faded to a lighter hue at the top of the building as if it was bleached by the sun. A strong southwestern Native American influence is noted by the figure of Kokopele welcoming guests through the entrance portal of the restaurant. Kokopele is one of the most well-known figures in Anasazi Indian mythology and Hopi legend. He is a trickster god, representing the spirit of music and presiding over childbirth and agriculture. His image has been found painted onto and carved into many rocks throughout the Southwest. Kokopele is usually depicted as a humpbacked flute player, but you might notice that at Disneyland Paris, he isn't carrying a flute, but a spear. While he normally carries a flute, sometimes in self-defense, it was exchanged for a spear to frighten away hostile spirits. At Fuente del Oro, Kokopele prevents any evil spirits from passing through the restaurant's entrance portal. On the opposite column of the portal, one can see a relief image of the moon and the stars. This image is based on Southwestern Native American design and is connected with the agricultural calendar. The crescent moon represents a time of planting. The full moon represents a time of harvesting. Despite the restaurant's rustic outer appearance of heavy wood beams, adobe brick, and plaster wall building materials, underneath it is all formidable skeletal steel framework. This was not just put into place to ensure the building's structural integrity, but also to support live-action stunt shows on the roof and balconies. The show featured characters from the TV series Zorro, which became popular in France during the 1980s. Although the stunt show was very well received among guests, it only lasted from 1992 to 1993. Crowds would gather outside the patio's walls, and park operations considered this a hazard to normal, orderly guest flow along the walkway between Fuente del Oro and Big Thunder Mountain. Upon entering the restaurant, one will immediately come across the counter where orders can be placed. The two large dining rooms are to the left and the right, the interior featuring a vibrant color palette. To create as much visual continuity as possible, these colors were applied to the tables, the chairs, the walls, the pillars, and ceilings. A variety of floor tiles were used throughout the restaurant, from refined glazed terracotta to rustic yet smooth stone pavers, all appropriate to the Mexican theming. Rather than confine the use of a singular type of floor tile to a specific room, it was determined to lay the floor tiles in such a way that they would invite the guests to investigate the various floor textures and to explore the restaurant's entire interior and exterior layout. The light fixtures are all reproductions of various designs that were researched and traced back to the authentic styles of the late 1850s, the era when the structure would have been built in Thunder Mesa. The remainder of interior decor and props and dressings were inspired by Native American and Mexican folk art and influences. The wall paintings, the fireplace, statues, umbrellas, masks, and even musical instruments. Cowboy Cookout Barbecue is located in the bar next to Cottonwood Creek Ranch, an area that reflects the agricultural communities that developed after the gold rush. The name Cottonwood Creek comes from the Virginia poplar trees that surround it, which were often used to block the strong winds found on the flatlands out west. With its original buffet, makeshift performance stage, outdoor tables, and small animal farm, the space always exudes a spirit of activity. In the Thunder Mesa backstory, Cowboy Cookout is the place where the people of Thunder Mesa would meet for their town celebrations. Karen Armitage noted that the furniture is a gift from the Thunder Mesa community, thus why it is eclectic and none of it matches. The windmill at the Cowboy Cookout dates back to 1880. Pat Burke went to see the owner, who was nearly 90 years old, and sat in his kitchen admiring the windmill. Pat asked him if he wanted to sell it. "Not really," he said. "Every morning I look out at it while I eat my breakfast, but the city would like me to get rid of it. Maybe if you offered me a television, I'd agree to part with it." The deal was done. Ron Esposito and John Olson went looking for the wood to build the restaurant, but they didn't know the French words for farm or stable. Ron began imitating a horse in front of the salesman, while John made mooing noises. The somewhat surprised and scared salesman never quite figured out what they meant. The pair started to carry wood samples with them from this point on. In the early 90s, guests could pick up charming hand-whittled figures and souvenirs in the woodcarver's workshop at Cottonwood Creek Ranch, near the Frontierland train depot. By request, the woodcarver fashioned plain wooden offcuts into lifelike models of your favorite farm animals or figures such as eagles, Indians, and quarter horses. The Critter Corral was a petting zoo near the depot. Guests were able to get close and interact with all kinds of farm animals such as cows, horses, goats, chickens, rabbits, and more. Most of the critters used to roam free in the area when Disneyland Park opened in 1992, but strict French laws forced management to build enclosures for all of the animals. Beyond the farmlands is the Pueblo Trading Post. In 1992, it used to sell Native American-themed merchandise due to its proximity to the Indian Canoes attraction. Well, time sure flies. If you're enjoying this jump from time to time with us, please hit the like button and subscribe for more great content. If you're looking for the perfect gear to celebrate the anniversary of any Disney park, visit the Carousel of Products at carouselofproducts.com. You can support this show and others by joining the WDWNT Inner Globe Society at patreon.com/WDWNT. Of course, this program is a labor of love and it requires a lot of research, but also you need to check out these incredible sources that we use to make this timekeeping show happen each and every week. They are fantastic. We'll see you real soon right here on Timekeeping.